Happy Father's Day, everyone, from Terry here at D-Lab Electronics. Over the years, many of you have wrote into me and said, Terry, what got you into electronics? What events took place and sent you down that path? Well, there was many things, but I would say the root of it is when I grew up, I was surrounded by hobbies. My dad was into 1/24th scale slot cars, RC airplanes, CB, and ham radios. On slot cars, he would actually build these things from scratch. So he had brass and he would solder them together using this famous soldering iron that we'd all know as Snozeramus. But this was his Unger that he soldered those chassis together with, and I still have it. And then we had a track in our basement, and it was huge. It was an 8-lane track. I believe it was called a Blue King, all made of wood, and it had copper strips for the brushes of the car, and there was like semi 12-volt batteries underneath this thing, and I was responsible for keeping that thing working so they could race. So when I was in high school, I spent 3 years in a machine shop class, and I really enjoyed that. But at the same time, I was attending an electronics vocational school. And in that school, of course, I was learning basic electronics, but we advanced into car radio installation and repair of home stereo equipment. So I was kind of on the fence of becoming a machinist or an electronics tech. But what really changed the game is Christmas of 1978. I received this kit. This is a Heathkit IM 5284 multimeter. And this was the first electronics kit that I had ever received, so it was very cool. And since it was a beginner's kit, the manual had additional information on how to solder, achieving a good solder joint. There was charts in there of how to read resistor color codes and the information on capacitors. So Heathkit really put a lot of effort into their manuals, and I was able to take that information and move forward. So as I stated, this was my first electronics kit. So it was thrilling after I built it to see that it actually worked. So I spent hours testing resistors, capacitors, switches, transformers, whatever I could to gain more understanding of what volts, ohms, and amps were. So over time, I started building basic circuits, and I used this meter to verify their operation. I also use this meter for car electrical work. My brothers were into old Volkswagens, and they always had electrical problems, so Terry would come out with a meter, and since this thing has its own built-in battery supply, I just pop that thing in the dash and troubleshoot it for him. I was the hero. So later on, after I became confident with this meter and using the information I learned at the Vocational Center for car stereo installation, I decided to put an ad in the paper and start doing a little sideline car stereo installation business in my driveway. And it really caught on. I had cars lined up down the street. It was more that I could take on. So it's pretty clear that this instrument helped to open my eyes to the many possibilities of electronics. So that pretty much set the hook. Now, after I graduated high school, I joined the Air Force. At 17 years old, my parents had to sign for me to go in. I had to take a ASVAB placement test to see what I was good at, and it indicated that electronics was my career path. So that's what I did. When I was in the Air Force, I worked in a shop called the Electronics Laboratory, and we would repair components from the Minuteman weapon system. Since the Air Force abbreviated everything, that was called E-Lab. After I got out of the service and opened up my shop, I thought, what am I going to call this electronics shop? My last name is Dayton, so I thought, all right, let's go down a letter, and D-Lab was born. And I've held that name for 40 years. Well, that's a story of what set me down this path. The seed was planted early. It's continuing to grow because I'm still learning. We're all here for a purpose, and what I wanted to be was that go-to electronics guy. The end goal is to share this information with you while I can before it's lost. When my dad passed away, all that information that was in his head was lost. And I do not want that to repeat. Happy Father's Day, everybody.